Okay, so another Monday is here, another week in the books for college football, and more craziness. So far this season, we can tell the college football offseason of 2022 was the college football offseason of chaos, and the season is following suit perfectly. I'm joined today by Preston Gant and Jay Smith. Gentlemen, where can the people find y'all's content before we really start hopping into the nitty gritty here?
Yeah, y'all can find me at the PG Show _ on Twitter, or just the PG Show on all the podcast platforms or YouTube.
And you can find me at Unfair Sports on Twitter, as well as Unfair Sports on the YouTube channel. And then I talk just random sports on the actual podcast, wherever podcasts are downloaded, listened to. Thanks, Todd, for having me again.
Absolutely, my man. Absolutely. And Cam, thank you for being here this evening. Cam has connected me with so many people. I mean, so many people in this content game. And Cam, I really do appreciate that, man. You've been awesome to this channel. Your support, it means the world. But before I go on that soliloquy about how much we all appreciate people who come in here and who support, we need to talk about Texas A&M. I need to kick it off with Texas A&M because I have a little bit to get off of my chest. Gentlemen, I need to open up this notebook and read off some things because Texas A&M has a problem right now. And they have a problem that not many people are talking about. Right now, last offseason, one of the most perplexing things that happened in college football, in my opinion, was Jimbo Fisher received a contract extension. Now, I understand Jimbo Fisher is one of the top head coaches in college football. He's got a national championship, but that doesn't mean he's infallible, right? That doesn't mean that he is without question. That doesn't mean he's not infallible, what have you. The reason why I want to start with this, Preston, the reason why I need to get your opinion on this and yours, Jay, is because Texas A&M fired Kevin Sumlin for the same thing they're getting from Jimbo Fisher. Allow me to explain. Through their first 50 games, Jimbo Fisher has one less win than Kevin Sumlin. Through their first 50 games, Jimbo Fisher has two less ranked wins than Kevin Sumlin had. Jimbo has 7, Kevin Sumlin had 9. Jimbo Fisher has 0 ranked wins on the road. Kevin Sumlin had 5. You want to know the one thing that Jimbo Fisher offers Texas A&M that Kevin Sumlin didn't? A group of 5 loss. So my biggest question here, and Preston, I need your answer to this. Texas A&M fired Kevin Sumlin after losing to LSU, SEC LSU, who we know recruits talent at an elite level, develops talent at an elite level, and is always in contention to ruin somebody's season. That's what we know about LSU. Kevin Sumlin was fired after losing to LSU. Now, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from y'all. Are we pretending like there's any universe that Kevin Sumlin wouldn't have been fired for what happened on Saturday if he was still the head coach of Texas A&M? But yet Jimbo Fisher received a contract extension. I need to hear from you, Preston. Is that a fair assumption that if Kevin Sumlin would have lost to App State, they'd have booted him?
Yeah, no, Kevin Sumlin definitely would have been fired. And I definitely think we should be holding Jimbo Fisher to the same standards. Now, you talked about the accolades that they both have in terms of win-loss record, but one of the things that I noticed that Jimbo has given Texas A&M that Kevin Sumlin didn't was a top 10 recruiting class. So since Jimbo's came in, they've been able to consistently be in the top 10 and, recently had the number 1 recruiting class. Whether that was due to NIL or anything, we'll just leave that one off the table for now.
Sure.
But he brought it in, and he's a good recruiter.
No doubt.
A great recruiter. However, and you guys were talking about it earlier, Josh Pate talked about it, but he can't, he's not adapting to where college football going. And that is what makes Nick Saban so great, is because Nick Saban adapts time and time again. And that's something that Jimbo's not doing. And you can see it in the way that he's calling plays and, everything else. And I don't know, Texas A&M is not going to be successful, I think, with Jimbo Fisher at the helm. I think you have to let Jimbo Fisher go, and you have to bring in somebody younger, like what we were talking about earlier, maybe in a Lance Leipold, especially with the job that he's doing down there at Kansas, which I know people might look at it and go, what? No, he's turning that Kansas program around. That stadium was 80% full in week 1, Kansas football. And so I don't know, Texas A&M, they're going to have to make coaching change. It's going to suck because I don't think you're going to get another coach in there right away that's going to recruit as well as Jimbo, unless you just go get a superstar head coach. But I don't know. I think Jimbo gets fired if they lose 6 games this year.
Yeah, and Chris, you just came in here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I am going to repeat the basis of this because I need you to answer this question for me. Through their first 50 games, we're talking about Jimbo Fisher. Last offseason, Jimbo Fisher received a contract extension. Through their first 50 games, Jimbo Fisher has 1 less win than Kevin Sumlin did. He has 2 less ranked wins than Kevin Sumlin did. Jimbo Fisher has 0 ranked wins on the road. Kevin Sumlin had 5. The only thing 2 things Jimbo Fisher is giving Texas A&M that Kevin Sumlin didn't. 1, a loss to a G5 program. And as PG just pointed out, really great point, by the way, a top 10 recruiting class. But I might argue, PG, that almost works against Jimbo Fisher, because now people can't say, oh, well, he has to clean up what Kevin Sumlin did. He's had 5 years of bringing in top tier recruiting classes, and we've gotten the exact same thing Kevin Sumlin got fired for.
No,
Chris,
you're right. In
what are you
2019,
thinking?
in 2019, when he came in, number 4 overall recruiting class, and in 2020, he had the number 6. So he's had those momentum going in. So you're right on that.
Yeah. What are we thinking here?
Well, I always say Jimbo Fisher is what, and he's notoriously an 8-5 coach. I kind of agree with when I have to agree with what PG just said a second ago. If he goes 6-6 as Jets thinks, or if he's going to be on the hot seat. Problem is kind of like a comment. Let's see what David Bressler pointed out. He still has about 5 years left on his contract, so the buyout will be enormous. And
$50 million.
Texas A&M. But hey, guess what? Texas A&M has oil money. They could give him land in his deal on the way out, right? But all jokes aside, I would say it's been a lackluster effort thus far. He's delivered in some moments. He's had some solid seasons, but his best season was the COVID year. And we all know that the COVID year was kind of an anomaly in itself. I mean, look at Nebraska. Nebraska had super seniors on their team, which was kind of responsible for the bulk of their success, or the success that everybody thought they had as being one of the greatest 3-9 teams ever. But with Jimbo Fisher, it's crazy to think that we've gotten this far and still haven't had that a great amount of success. How many times has he finished in the top 3 of the SEC West? I mean, kind of by default, you would think so, but at the same time, I don't think he still hasn't beat. Has he beat LSU? Has he beat the Georgia? I mean, I know they don't play all the time, but I'm just saying it's outside of the Alabama wins, he really hasn't done all that much.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's got Arkansas and Miami coming up. And I don't know if y'all have watched Arkansas, but that's a team I've been talking about. They look good.
Yeah.
KJ Jefferson. Oh my God.
So Jay, you saw the video I put out. You heard everything. Before I let you go, I will add in this. Gentlemen, if I had somebody that had just started watching college football, they would be completely within their right to watch Texas A&M, look at Jimbo Fisher and say, that guy's a defensive-minded coach. They just need to get an offensive coordinator in there that knows what he's doing, and they're going to be great. Because Jimbo's defenses have been good. His offenses have been anemic for a while. He's an offensive-minded guy, and the calling card has not been offense. That's where I'm a little bit lost. Jay, I pass it over to you.
No, in watching your video, you were right. It's perplexing to see that Jimbo Fisher keeps doing this. Like, I'm looking at a stat here. First 50 games, Jimbo Fisher's 35-15. Kevin Sumlin was 36-14. So you're 100% right. If this was Kevin Sumlin, he's gone. But Jimbo Fisher has a better agent than Kevin Sumlin did because of that buyout
right
size.
there.
That buyout is so ridiculous that even though A&M has almost all the money in the world, they're not going to want to pay that buyout. But it's just all bad down there. And like you said, we were talking about this before. Josh Pate at Late Kick with Josh had mentioned that he basically put up a big jug of water that said 2014 it said expired. He said if you take this out the fridge and this is milk and it says 2014 on it, you throw it out because it's expired. That is Jimbo Fisher's offense. He needs to toss it, start from scratch, do something different. I don't know what it is. Is he like a control freak or something? Can he not bring in an offensive-minded coordinator to run things? I'll make this point with that. It's the Nick Saban thing to me. And Ty, you'll appreciate this. Nick Saban knows that he's the smartest man in the room most of the time, but he doesn't act like it. He brings in people that he's like, you know what? Let's try to think differently here. That Alabama offense was so run heavy for years. I remember reading that scouts in the NFL would say they didn't want to take an Alabama running back because they had too many miles. He brought in Lane Kiffin, a guy with so much baggage. He brought him in and said, you know what? Run this offense, modernize it, do your thing. Just don't be too stupid. I'm going to rein you in when I need to, but I'm going to let you do your thing. Just completely revolutionized the offense. Everything changed. Start throwing up massive numbers. Then, of course, Lane gets kicked out, right before the bowl game. But that's not the point. My point is, can Jimbo Fisher not bring an OC in and let them do that? And he just step back and focus on, honestly, like you said, his best attribute, which is his defenses. Why can't he do that? Why is he so much of an egomaniac?
Yeah, and
Scott Frost. Listen, I want to see a Bama Texas A&M recruiting battle war for Scott Frost. I want to see who can get him.
Well, you already know that is a Nick Saban move to bring him in as an analyst and just bring him in. But the thing that I don't get, and I think really what I keep going back to, right? We've heard Jimbo Fisher and them, they put a lot of attention on themselves this offseason, right? Like one, through the recruiting class, which that's great attention. That's the type of attention you want to have on your program. Yeah, I just did this right here. If you think it's from NIL, okay, so what, right? Like NIL, that's first off, I would have been college football's villain. If y'all had hit me, if I was Jimbo with the NIL stuff, I'd have came out proud and been like, hell yeah, I'm better at NIL than y'all are. What of it? This is the new era of college football, and I'm going to be the best at it. You got to catch up with me. That'd have been my attitude. I'd have embraced the full villain arc, but I'm a little bit different there. The thing that I don't get is we heard all this attention to Texas A&M, and they were supposed to be so much better, and it's just more of the same year after year after year with the Aggies, and I'm certainly not trying to pile on. I'm certainly not trying to just unload on Texas A&M, because the reason I take the position I do, whether Aggie fans believe me or not, is because I side with Aggie fans. They don't deserve to have a coach that's getting this massive contract extension and giving them the same results they've had for years. Well, I don't get it.
Ty, one of the problems I had early on when Jimbo Fisher went to Texas A&M, it wasn't necessarily the hire. It was the fact that they would legitimately sign him to a 10-year contract. It didn't make sense then, and it doesn't make any sense now. I think it's one of the same problems that I see up there for a team, a program like Michigan State. I like their head coach, but at the same time, I don't want to marry myself to somebody for 10 years. You get what I'm saying? So I think that it's worth noting that maybe we're putting too much focus on, or putting the spotlight too much on Jimbo and not enough on Texas A&M for making a real
great point. That is a great point.
Now, the question is, like, yes, like they've given him this massive contract, but is it worth it to give him a massive contract because he keeps you relevant in an SEC conference that is super competitive and you can easily fall off?
Yeah, like I was just gonna say I don't think Texas A&M is necessarily fighting that. Their fans and that fan base, and then kind of the fake history that they like to parade around with. I know that's a bit harsh, but still, the legacy or the history that they like to parade around, they will stay relevant, because a lot of people ask what's happened to Texas A&M, this and that or whatnot. They have all the money. Yeah. They can do the NIL. They can do the NIL deals with any coach. You can plug and pull. You can go out there and get North Texas coach, put him back there, and I bet you he can still go get a top recruiting class with all that money and all the incentives that they're trying to give. The problem that I have with the whole 10-year contract thing is that you're creating yourself a huge debt hole. So the whole thing is you find yourself like LSU having to pay somebody $17 million to go on talk shows or do motivational speaks to talk about, yeah, I walked out this door, but I had $17 million in my backpack. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
you create these problems for yourself. Whereas you look at what OU did with Lincoln, I mean, yeah, we wanted him to stay, contracts. He was here for X amount of many years, but you didn't see Lincoln come out and sign a $10 million contract. It puts you in a hole, and you're kind of having to hold on. I mean, you see it with so many different coaches. What was the coach? He coached at Notre Dame, and then he coached at
Charlie Weiss.
Charlie Weiss was getting checks from just about damn near everybody.
I think he's still getting paid by Kansas to this day, to be absolutely honest. But
yeah,
more so a joke. But that buyout for Jimbo Fisher he's 100% guaranteed. So it's like over $95 million. So, but it's one-sided. They will pay out if it's only for on-field performance. Like I said, he has a way better agent than Kevin Sumlin did. So if you fire me because I go 6-6, you got to pay me my whole contract, baby. But if you fire me for doing something, and calls for, something off the field, then yeah, he's going to walk away with nothing. But in this whole circumstance with A&M, I get it. And you're right. You're right, Chris. That's the biggest problem for them, is that they're just creating a hole. And I don't understand why Jimbo Fisher was a selection. After the debacle that went down there at Florida State, where it seemed like it was just the inmates were running the asylum, as everyone was trying to say. Everything was just all bad. You decide to go snatch him away because you want him to beat Nick Saban. Cool. You may get a win once every 3 to 4 years because
Kevin Sumlin beat Nick Saban.
Right. A broke clock is right twice a day, especially here. So you're going to get that from him. I totally get that. But that's just about anybody. It's no different to me than kind of the LSU thing. And this is the only reason why I'm giving Brian Kelly a little grace. He'll figure it out, because just about everybody that goes and coach at LSU in the last 20 years have won a national championship. The talent is there. The grounds are fertile. All you got to do is figure out a way to win your state. Those kids will win it on their own. You ain't got to do no work. They'll figure it out for you. A&M, their problem is that they'll figure out a way to beat Saban, but then they won't be able to beat anybody else. Like, no matter what, even as fertile as the grounds are in Texas, they just can never get right. But why Jimbo Fisher? Like, that's the only thing I don't get. Why Jimbo? I never understood the appeal. Jameis Winston was the only reason why this dude won a national championship. I did not like him coming in after Bobby Bowden. You could see that there was a different aura at Florida State. Why this dude? That's the only question I'm asking, is why this dude?
And I completely echo the question. Chris, I apologize. I just realized that I gave my whole soliloquy and passed it off to you earlier, and I forgot to ask you the question that came at the end of it. Whenever Kevin Sumlin was fired from A&M, he lost to an SEC rival in LSU. We know who LSU is. We know the caliber of athlete they field. We know the recruiting grounds they have access to. It's one of the most talented programs in the nation. It's LSU. We know who they are on a good year. My contention here, and I want to hear it from you, Kevin Sumlin would have been fired for losing to App State, because Kevin Sumlin was fired for losing to LSU. Jimbo Fisher got a contract extension for doing the exact same thing Kevin Sumlin did. What do you think? Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of people will want to say kind of the obvious,
You know exactly what I'm getting to.
Yeah, I know exactly what
you know exactly what I'm getting at.
It's tough. I mean, it goes without saying. I don't even think we have to say it. People know what we're talking about. It's hard to get past that point, knowing that when they have similar records that all four of us have seen and we've looked at very closely over these past few days, and we're just like, this makes no sense. Because at the same time, my uncle, he pointed out something to me. He said, hey, I said, well, the only difference between Sumlin and Jimbo is that he was getting those top recruiting classes. He says, no. He says Sumlin brought in Kyler Murray and the other kid, Josh Allen from Arizona, and he had a heck of a lot more players. That class was supposed to do something. He said, hey, he did all of that. Johnny Manziel, all the rest of that goes, Mike Evans, everything. So it's really hard to not even go across that line, in this right here, especially when you do the compare and contrast, because it's not that much contrast on this whole issue. So it's really hard not to touch on this subject because I mean he's a black head coach, so it's tough, man. It's tough, and some people will say no, that's just the business. But I would say, hey, if you look at it closer, it's not even a hint of it there. It's all over.
See, and here's the thing. I would be 100% fine with it's just the business argument had they not given Jimbo Fisher a contract extension. Because even then I would have understood that, hey, something doesn't make sense here. But the thing I cannot get behind for the life of me is there's no discernible difference in result from what Jimbo is doing than what Kevin Sumlin is doing. And if you want to argue that Kevin Sumlin had a 5-loss season and Jimbo didn't last year, that's fine. He had a 4-loss season. We're splitting hairs, but you don't give him a massive he's paid at the same rate as the coaches that are going to college football playoffs consistently, that are competing for national championships at a semi-consistent basis, and he's done none of that. He's been in college football playoffs the same amount of times as Kevin Sumlin.
It's the thing it is with the tie. It's a recency bias piece. It's the beating of Nick Saban. And they're thinking, oh, we beat him once. We can keep doing this. Sumlin showed you it's not that easy. You got to have some ridiculous teams to win those games, or hope that Alabama has that one down year they have every so many years. That's what he took advantage of. That's one of those things that Jimbo Fisher took advantage of. But that's no guarantee that it's going to be consistent. There's no guarantee. I mean, hell, this is Nick Saban. He adjusts. Like we were talking about fire Bill O'Brien for a while. Don't worry. He'll be gone eventually. He's going to get a job somewhere else. He'll be replaced with another brain on the offensive side, Scott Frost, which I really wish like Brent Venables would just bring him in just for the fun of it and try that Nick Saban deal. Bring him in as an analyst. Yeah. Go create your own school of rehabilitation for coaches. We need that. But that's the thing with Jimbo is, in Texas A&M, is they really believe that this is something that's going to be sustainable without realizing that every year they're going 9-4, 8-5. That's your sustainable, guys. Be happy with that. And you probably need to let him go. I just don't get the Jimbo Fisher appeal. I still don't.
Can I make one point on this subject?
Absolutely.
I think one of the things, look, let's take the focus off of Jimbo right now. Let's just say there are a number of programs around the nation who struggle with this one thing, and they have it in common. There's a bunch of programs out there in this country right now that want to make the splash higher, not the right higher.
Great point. Point.
Valid. So good.
So you've seen that. Look, I hate to bring them up. Sark, we can figure it out. He's in year 2. Let's see what he can do. Great performance on Saturday. Okay,
unbelievable.
It's been said. But the whole thing, Texas is a prime example. They've tried to make the splash higher 2 times prior to the hiring of Sark. You look at, USC is kind of blundered. They thought that they were making the right hire or a good move. That was something that was kind of the exception. But it's a lot of programs out here who really try too hard to make that splash higher, not the right hire. And so that honestly, we always talk about the recruiting classes. We know players truly make or break the program, but the coach does too. And I mean, some teams just can't, some programs just can't get it right. Miami, for example, now that they have Cristobal, now it seems like they're going to be back on track, but I think that's just a problem around the nation that needs to be fixed. You got to make the right hires so you can keep your program sustainable for the foreseeable future. It just is crazy to me that we sit here and we see so many programs have to make that splash higher every year.
Yeah, it's been a plague of college football that seems to rear its ugly head every single year. And we're left guessing which program is going to be the next victim. Yeah. We've talked enough about A&M. I want to move on to another team that lost this weekend, and that's Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame is in a position where they've lost back-to-back games. I get it. Week 1, they played Ohio State. I'm 3 games going back to last year. Thank you, PG. I actually forgot about that. Thank you. But I can excuse an Ohio State loss early. I mean, Ohio State's very talented. That's a team I think is going to be very good. Not sure yet, but I would bet money that Ohio State's the real deal based on the talent they have. So I wasn't mad at the Ohio State loss. But this weekend, really? What are we thinking about Notre Dame right now? Because they've never had a head coach lose their first 3 games, and that's exactly where they are right now.
I'll jump in this one first. I hope Notre Dame will give Marcus Freeman a little grace on this. Now, that Marshall loss was awful. Like you said, the Ohio State one, the effort that they showed, the fight that they showed in that game, I appreciated that. Okay, looks like the players like this guy. Something we can't say about their former coach. Now we're going up in this situation to where they could lose 3 straight games. I'm just hoping Notre Dame gives him just a little grace to where he can try to get the ship right, get everything going the way that they need to. Because if they start swapping out coaches a lot, I think Notre Dame can slowly start to just disappear. Because they did at one point. Then they finally got, Brian Kelly in and they started to go back up. Marcus can recruit. He's got a great recruiting class coming in. Like right now, what is he, like the 3rd or 4th class in the country right now? He's got a class coming in. And he can coach. We saw what he's 4th right now with 24/7, and we saw what he did at Cincinnati, and then when he came to Notre Dame, they've got to give him a little bit of time. But it sucks that they lost, and everybody wants his head already. Everybody feels like they're undisciplined, that they're not playing with intensity, they're not playing well at all. So I hope that they give him some time to figure this bad boy out, especially when Brian Kelly just bounced on the squad like he did. But man, there's a good chance that if they lose 3. They may go ahead and just let him go early, which would suck.
Yeah, it'd be wild. What are we thinking, Chris, PG? What about Notre Dame? What stood out?
Let PG go.
Yeah, so I don't think they're going to fire him this year. I think they're going to give him a little bit of grace, but
they should.
Definitely losing 3 straight games sucks. And, with what we saw out of the Notre Dame team last week against Marshall, like, am I really convinced? And another thing, the important thing to remember is Tyler Buckner's out for the rest of the season. So they're now without their starting quarterback. They now have to go to Drew Pine. I mean, BYU looks really good. And then you got to go, you play Clemson at home and you have to go to USC at the end of the season, which, that's going to be a really tough game. There's a good chance they could lose all 3 of those and end up 7-5 this season. Maybe even worse. Notre Dame fans, I think they need to calm down, and I think they need to give him 2 or 3 years. Because again, you got to be able to get your own guys in there, your own cycle. You're leaving the Brian Kelly era. You've got a younger guy in there that can recruit better personally than I think Brian Kelly could at Notre Dame, just because he's a little bit more relatable to these athletes. Now, you have a really bad season. There's a good chance you probably lose Peyton Bone at that point. You don't have really a 5-star in this class. But that's okay. You've got to work from somewhere, right? It's the same thing that we talk about, like I said with Texas this year. You got to start with somewhere. You got to take a win somewhere. If he only wins 7 games this year, but the team's playing really hard at the end of it all, and, he starts to turn out in 2024 and put out a good recruiting class again, then, you're going up into the right direction. But I think everybody needs to slow the roll. I don't think Notre Dame's in trouble. It just sucks, first time head coach. It's just gonna happen. And I think the team was a little upset that, they lost that game to Ohio State, because for a while it looks like they had control on that game. And you lost. If I may,
I accidentally said earlier, I think the timing was real bad. You'd said they shouldn't fire him. They need to give him more time. And I was agreeing with your statement saying they need to give him more time, not saying they need to get him out of there. Marcus Freeman needs more time. You can't judge anybody in their first year, because we don't know what Notre Dame would have looked like with Brian Kelly with a new quarterback this year anyways, right?
Good point.
We don't know. So I'm not going to say they'd be 0-3, 0-2 this year, losing the ball, but you get my point. Chris, what are your thoughts?
So Greg McElroy has his own podcast that I think is pretty great. Him and Joe Klatt, they definitely those are two podcasts that are pretty cool. But Greg McElroy and I think one of his co-hosts or whatnot, they were talking about this, and I agree with that point. It was a sound point that was made. Basically, they were saying that, hey, this game against Marshall will tell me everything I need to know about Notre Dame going forward. Why? Because when Notre Dame comes off of a tough loss, a disappointing loss against, kind of top tier talent, right? Like a Wisconsin last year or now Ohio State. Usually they come home and they play against somebody who's either kind of like a low FBS level opponent, right? And they struggle. So what were you wanting to see from Notre Dame? You were wanting to see Notre Dame go out there and be dominant against this team and kind of set the precedent saying like, hey, okay, yeah, we're here. We're to be messed with. What happened at Ohio State happened at Ohio State. We made some mistakes, but we cleaned it up. We're ready. Let's get it. But you didn't see that. And so I think, a good point, somebody just commented the name, Ty Willingham. It could be that Ty Willingham 2.0, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Notre Dame I don't think they would like to take that media hit in 2022 of only giving a coach 2 years, right?
Yeah, someone actually commented Ty Willingham rock.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So to actually give somebody 2 years on a contract that probably be like 3 or 4 in this day and age, that's not good, especially with the way that this PC culture is going. But nevertheless, there's definitely some concern there simply because that this team can piece it together and be good. But I mean, I'm just going to be real with you. All the conversations that I've had about Notre Dame these past few days, Freeman got to go. He got to go find him a quarterback. That's going to be a game changer for him. To be quite frank with you, defense, I really have no problem with the defense that they have. I feel like they have athletes and he's having to play at a hell of a level. One of the problems that I have with Notre Dame is Tommy Rees. I just don't like him that much as a play caller. I just don't. And so I think that's one of the poor. I think that's what's kind of holding the team back is his play calling, to be quite frank with you. Now, they don't have the outside weapons per se, but at the same time with the quarterbacks, they recruit at a high level. But you think that they would be in a conversation to get some of these 5-star kids. What was it? The Dante Moore kid that committed to Oregon. You would think that Freeman would be all over a kid like that, especially since he's kind of close to your backyard up there in Detroit. You get what I'm saying? So you think you'd be able to keep a Midwest kid in the Midwest. So I think that's kind of where it starts for me offensively, because even with Brian Kelly and with Tommy Rees, it wasn't the greatest marriage, I believe. And so my whole thing is that until they get a quarterback, I don't think that this fixes anything. I don't think they can fix anything.
They do have a quarterback, but it's a future quarterback in CJ Carr. 5-star quarterback in 2024. CJ Carr is currently committed to Notre Dame. Now, whether they can keep him, I don't know. The issue is in 2023, all of these quarterbacks are taken. And really and ideally, and I know OU fans are going to hate this, the best chance I think that Notre Dame has to go get a 5-star quarterback is to push all your chips in the bucket for Denton Guyer. Go to Denton Guyer, grab all those kids, and try to bring Jackson Arnold there. That's the only chance that they have at getting a 5-star quarterback, because the other ones I just don't see going there. You already got 5-star Peyton Bowen there, and Jackson Arnold is really good friends with him. Go out there and get you a Ryan Yates. Bring in Landon Sides, who currently doesn't have Power 5 offers from anybody. Go get Sutton Lee. Push all the chips in the basket. Get you a 5-star quarterback. OU fans are going to hate that, but that's honestly the truth.
But it's fair. It's a fair assessment, because that is your best bet, is to try to use your recruits to go recruit other players. I mean, that's what Jackson Arnold's doing today. He's going out there recruiting other players. Every time you look up, he's tweeting somebody or saying, putting up the chosen. He's throwing it out there to a lot of people, trying to bring the talent with him. And that's honestly, in today's day with social media and the way these kids really talk to each other at all these events and stuff, it's the smartest way to recruit. Get kids that want to play together.
But I don't think, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I don't think that good point, fair assessment. get that, PG, but it's Notre Dame, man. They don't have to go out there and just chase like that. And Freeman, I think Freeman still has some juice. I think that he's going to be able to turn it around. We just got to give him a second. Look, if Texas can give Sark a grace period after that 5-7 season that he turned out with 6 straight losses, why can't Notre Dame do the same? They're under a new regime. They're ushering a new era of their program. Be patient.
Sark didn't inherit what Freeman inherited.
Yeah.
What did he inherit, though? What did he inherit? That defense,
a winning program.
Oh, he said a winning program.
Now I can make this argument though.
No, like
Sark,
one
Sark
program was in a much better place.
Talent. Sark inherited more talent, though.
What's talent if you don't have any conducive setting around it for success?
The culture's bad. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. But Freeman also, that Notre Dame team, like you mentioned, he didn't have a quarterback. And that's kind of where the foundation of your team's going to be. Once your quarterback's gone, you got to kind of start from scratch there. If you ain't got nothing in the pipeline, which doesn't look like BK had anything in the pipeline, that's where the struggle's going to come in.
Yeah, I personally, again, one thing Marcus Freeman could do is he could go into the boosters and he says, listen, I know we're without Buckner. We've got this other guy back here for 2023. We're going to go in. We're going to find a good quarterback out of the transfer portal because there'll be somebody in the transfer portal this year. Right? Go get one out of there. If you can't get Jackson Arnold, which it probably is unlikely they're going to be able to get Jackson Arnold. So just say, hey, we're going to go get one out of the transfer portal. That is our plan. Transfer portal all day long. In 2024, we have a 5-star quarterback. Hopefully our transfer portal guy can get us through 2024. In 2025, we'll have a new quarterback. We're going to go out there and recruit one every single year. So we constantly have a cycle of quarterbacks in that room.
I mean, and it may take, and just to be quite frank with you, and I didn't really watch the Toledo game all that much, but it may be one of those things where you just go all in on defense and you say, offense, we're going to play a very controlled style of football. We're going to work the field and we're going to focus on time of possession opposed to some of the things that we've been doing now, because that may be the way you go. You may have to win ugly.
Go to the wishbone offense.
Yeah, say that again.
Just run that ball.
Yeah, just run the ball. I mean, that may be something that you really have to do if you're Notre Dame this year. Really salvage the season. And it's so crazy that we're saying that and they're only 0-2.
Yeah, I mean, salvaging your season is important, but I think it's even probably more important for Marcus Freeman to go in there to the boosters and to this program and say, listen, this isn't to go win a national championship and to get to where Clemson and Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State are at. It's not going to be a quick, fast turnaround. Like, you're going to have to give me 4 years. This is a 4-year plan. We can get a 5-star quarterback in here, but that doesn't mean he's going to come in and make an immediate difference. Like, we're going to have to put some time into this, and it might be rough at some points, and you're going to have to be okay with that, because the more and more you keep changing coaches and everything else, it's just going to keep getting worse. It's just going to keep spiraling out of control, and you're going to be in the same position that Texas and Nebraska are in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're going to move to another game that's going to hurt my heart a little bit. And that's my Alabama Crimson Tide taking on the Texas Longhorns in a game, I even said it in the thumbnail of my video, we escaped out of, right? And there's no other way to put it. If you're asking me what the good is, the first 2 drives, the last 2 drives, and our defensive front. Our defensive front was lights out. We held Bijan Robinson, who I consider to be the best running back in the nation, to 2.7 yards per attempt on over 20 carries. We held Texas offense, which has a great running back room, to 2.4 yards per carry. Now the secondary got 8 up. The one DB from a corner position that I thought played a great game was Terrion Arnold, who didn't even start the entire game, but I would bet my bottom dollar he starts from here on out. If we're flipping the script and you're asking me, what did Texas do, Ty? Why did Will Anderson not have the game so many people thought he would? First and foremost, because Sark had a brilliant game plan. They're going to get the ball out quick. And even when Quinn was in and they were doing their deep shots, Quinn was throwing those deep shots with anticipation. Whenever he saw the one-on-one, the second his wide receiver was even with the defensive back, he said, forget it, let it fly. And he threw beautiful passes to the outside because he's got the arm strength to test the field. Bama plays a lot of man, and Bama was not playing a lot of too high safety until the latter portion of that game.
Yeah.
Texas had a great game plan. Chris says Texas beat themselves. Chris, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Texas because Texas took it to Alabama. I would argue Alabama beat themselves.
Yes.
Because we've never seen Nick Saban team have that many penalties, play that as uncharacteristic. And I'll put it like this. We couldn't drive the ball all game long, but then all of a sudden, in the last 2 drives, it's like a light went off in their head. Oh, Texas's defense is playing off. Why don't we do quick slants and outs? We did that and drove right down the field in a minute with next to no resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest takeaway from this is seeing Bill O'Brien call plays on the same field as Steve Sarkisian. These two are not the same. They are not close to the same. Steve Sarkisian in Texas played an amazing game. Bama escaped out of there with a win. And I do mean escape. Hats off to Texas. Any Texas fan in here, I have all the respect in the world for what y'all did. I think that, and he said there were a lot forced by us. Yes, frightening, but far less forced by y'all than we're just bad. You don't force the face mask. Someone grabs it. So I'm going to push back on you there, frightening. You don't grab someone's hand and put it on your face mask. That's not how that works. So, I mean, Bama was uncharacteristic.
Ty, I got to step up and I got to say it. Nobody cares about moral victories, about consolation prizes. Okay? If you want to give them an attendance award, give them an attendance award. They still did what Texas did all last year, which is fold, and they lost. They had every reason to win that game. Now they're going around complaining about all this stuff. Now, I will say this right here. Not only did you guys commit 15 penalties, but if you would have told Alabama,
and we had a few more that weren't called that should have been called. Being 100% transparent.
But here's my thing: if you would have went out there and told Saban right before the game started, hey, they're going to max protect 99.9% of the game, Saban would have probably looked at you and laughed and said, "No, I know, Sark. He's not going to do all that." That's what he did. I've had to sit here and I can't wait for check out. Hey, if you got to guys tune into our pod here at 6:15 with Nino's Corner, me and Jay. But I've had to sit here and listen to Texas fans gloat about Kelvin Banks and all the rest of it. And I'm like, my God, it's no wonder why he did great against that defensive line. They max protected. They went. I seen Texas in 12 personnel.
But Texas with Steve Sarkisian bases out of 12 personnel.
And I get that. But at the same time, you just to sit there in that 90% of the time, to sit there in there.
That's what they do, man. That's what they do. And hats off to them.
It's crazy to me. But the whole thing is the game changer for y'all was when y'all took Jackson off of Worthy. Kyrie Jackson could not stay with Worthy. I don't know what was going on with that assignment, but he definitely missed it.
I'll be honest on that piece.
Yeah,
I don't know too many people that can stay with Xavier Worthy. I think that's kind of like the point of the way that he's played over the last couple of years. And go ahead, Ty. I know you have something, and I got a couple points to go.
Frightening says he doesn't agree with me here. Frightening, we were just talking with Homer, and Homer broke down the scheme, and he was the one who was telling me. And I didn't say y'all base out of 12 personnel. I say y'all run it, that set at a high degree. Y'all base out of 12 personnel at a high degree. Not that is your flatline set. But go back and listen to Homer, who knows this scheme because he talks to the guys. He'll tell you how often you're in 12.
Yeah. And so with that, and with this game, to be honest, in a way, both teams kind of beat each other. I think the one saving grace for Bama, in my personal opinion, is when Hudson Card hurt his leg. When he got that ankle injury, if he was more healthy, if he was able to actually put some oomph on those passes deep, that game could have been a lot different. It could have been a lot more ugly. Saban would have had to completely change everything on the defensive side. And then at that point, Bijan Robinson would have been able to run the ball. I feel like that max protection, Bama was prepared to stop Bijan, period. That's who they wanted. That's who they wanted to key in. That's who they wanted to dominate. And y'all did. Getting Quinn out, because he was, like you said, he was launching it. He was quickly getting high.
Quinn was impressive.
and throwing it. He was just getting out there. He didn't care. He knew at some point some of those catches were going to be made. Like he was going to hit the right spot at some point, and wide receiver was going to grab it. That is where I think that's something I've heard before in the past about like Bama over the last like year or so. And I think that's actually kind of a knock some people have tried to say about like Jay Valai at Bama, is that the secondary has kind of struggled over the last kind of year when he was there.
I'm going to push back on that. People said that. I have, and Chris, he'll attest to this. I've had outside complaints with Jay Valai, but the actual play on the field was, I will never put that on Jay Valai. We had corners go down left, right, and center last year. That's not on Jay Valai. He can't help that he didn't have a consistent guy out there. That's not on him.
And it makes sense. And so with that, it kind of like my point here is that the secondary looked like they kind of had a little bit of a struggle versus, well, the Christian, they struggled against those receivers. But Texas has produced some receivers. Healthy, I think they may have pulled this out. Not healthy, it was the perfect advantage for Alabama to force, intermediate passes and really put the pressure on Hudson Card. So overall, it was a good game. I was actually very happy, and I was glad that this game played out the way it did. The other factor that I took in consideration with this is that it was like 120 degrees on the field at 11 o'clock in Texas. Yeah, that plays a part, and I think that's what hurts Texas the most. It's probably conditioned. It seems like they kind of like slow down at the end of games because they're probably just exhausted. And it looked like Bama was exhausted too in that game. It was hot. I know it was. So, but overall, that was a really good game. Bama just forced their way out, worked their way out of that one. Texas should not have their head down after that one.
PG, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with the moral victories part, because I think if you're a Texas fan, and I've said this about Oklahoma, you got to take the little things as a win. And the fact that they were able to play with Alabama without your starting quarterback. Yeah, without your starting quarterback, your second quarterback who it was apparent to be hurt, almost the entire game. And your defense looked incredibly better from last season. Like, I'm not saying, oh, it's a moral victory because you played them and only lost by 1 point. I'm looking at it as, no, here's what you got. You played Alabama, who we all consider to pencil in as a college football playoff team, one of the best teams in the country. And your defense played up to the level of what we would expect a Georgia to play up to against Alabama. And then additionally, for all the talk around Quinn Ewers all season, like, he went out there and balled out up until he got hurt. Now, I will say this. Texas fans need to slow down. Don't bring him back too quickly, because you don't want to have a Sammy Bradford type of situation on your hands like we did in 2009. But anyway, that's beside the point.
I'm going to answer this real quick. PG, I'm going to pass it right back to you. Chris asks, Bama is overrated then. Is that what y'all are saying? No, because the ideas do not have to be mutually exclusive. I don't know if Bama is overrated yet, but what I do know is Bill O'Brien made this game way more difficult on Alabama's offense than it had to be. We were running the ball with ease, and all of a sudden we're doing 3 passing sets in a row. I don't know if y'all noticed, every passing set was intermediate to deep routes. The only thing we could get going was the short stuff, but we would pass it 3 times in a row and everything would be 10 to 15 yards on an offensive line that was getting worked. That doesn't make any sense. Seeing Sark call plays next to Bill O'Brien was eye-opening. I'm so sorry, PG. I'm going to pass it back to you.
Real quick, PG, before you say something, and I want to point something that Todd just made mention of, that Bill O'Brien piece. This game felt like Steve Sarkisian when he took over for Lane Kiffin in that national championship game. That's what it felt like as far as the play calling goes. It looked like it just was not. It just was. It didn't feel like it was good. Like there was no. It didn't feel like there was a plan. Let's put it like that. I'm trying to figure out how your running backs did not run the ball more than Texas, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs out there.
And
he had 9 catches.
I'm going to push back on frightening. You said we were shutting the run down after the bus to keep it real. We didn't try. We had 16 runs all game, so that's not indicative of one team. We didn't try. So we abandoned it. We did not do it at all, and it hurt us in the passing game because you knew exactly what we were doing. That was an issue. I apologize, PG. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, PG.
Yeah, no, so that's just my thing, right? I just want Texas fans to walk away from this game and understand, you're getting better, and you played a Bama team. You know
Texas
where
played
you
great.
need to go to. Yeah, like you need to where you need to go and improve now for the rest of the season. And it's unfortunate that your quarterback got hurt. It's really unfortunate.
PG, we've seen this before with LSU. They did the same thing. They went out there and played LSU close that year right there, and then they came out the rest of the year and didn't do that.
I don't know. Did something just feel something felt different about this? I don't know what it was, but something feels different about this Texas team. I don't know what it is. I'm not a Texas fan. You can clearly see that behind me, but something feels different this year about what they're doing out there. And I don't know if it's because Sark is a Saban prodigy, and maybe he is trying to change things that haven't been able to been changed before at Texas. I don't know what it is, but something about that game, and the fans were all excited. I don't know. It just seemed different. It seems like Texas has got some good momentum going for them. Now, what you need to do is you need to take those little wins that you have out of this game and build on those the rest of the season. Even if you only win 8 or 9 games, that's okay. Because rarely ever do you see programs win 5 games and then turn around and go win their conference championship the next year. It's very rare. So Texas fans just need to slow down and understand what they did well and all of that. The other thing is, and I have this question for Ty and everybody else, but Nick Saban had to sit there and coach against Sark, and obviously is getting beat up by him. Do you think there is any regret about letting Sark go and potentially not doing what Bob Stoops did to Lincoln Riley and handing the reins off early to get another good coach into Alabama before Saban wants to retire?
If I may, I'll take this first. I think that as much as Saban would have loved to have kept Steve Sarkisian, this is one thing I will say about Saban. He's always been very consistent in telling his assistants, if you have an opportunity to be a head coach, take it. Because those opportunities don't come knocking every day in this industry. It's very hard. And so if you get the opportunity, go take it. I think Saban is incredibly proud of Steve Sarkisian and the job he has done thus far. Because look, PG, I got to agree with you, man. Like I'm not here saying that Texas is going to the college football playoffs. I'm not here saying the job is done. I'm here saying that Texas team took it to Alabama for the better part of 3 quarters. 2 drives to begin the game, 2 drives to end the game. Bryce Young and Bama's defensive line. That was the bright spot. That's what it was. Chris hopped out of here because he's got a podcast he's got to get to right now. If y'all need to go check that out as soon as we're done, because he's having Nino on. That's going to be a great conversation. They're going to be talking more about that. But I agree with Sean here, right? I agree with C-Note here. Quinn Ewers was that dude. He was that dude. He absolutely was. I can't take anything away from Texas. And as Frightening pointed out, Sandra pointed it out. Now, I pushed back a little bit on Frightening, but Frightening, the double-edged sword to my argument is, well, y'all stopped running it because you weren't able to run it as effectively as you would like. And maybe that's the case, but I still say you have got to keep trying to run, because at the point where you eliminate the threat of a run, you're making it much harder on your defense, on your offense, on everything. I'm going to leave it with this. I left that game very, very impressed with Texas. I have nothing but respect for what they did on the field, because their playmakers are as real as I've been trying to tell y'all all season. And that offensive line, that defensive line, they played a great game. Hats off to the Texas Longhorns. I can't wait to see what they do for the rest of the year. I'm just sad. And as I said in my video, if you want me to ask the bad for Texas, the only bad takeaway I have is maybe playing a little soft in coverage in the final few minutes of that game when you left Bryce Young the time, maybe, but I don't think that that's necessarily bad because it was working all game. And then 2, Quinn got hurt and the injuries. That's the bad for Texas. It's not anything self-inflicted, not saying you played perfect, just saying you played as well as you could have. And I have nothing but respect. Gentlemen, as we're waning down, though, I'd be remiss if I didn't give y'all's opportunity to talk about the Oklahoma Sooners, who had a little bit of a slow start, but once they got clicking, they cruised to victory and looked very good doing it. Talk to me about Oklahoma this weekend and what you thought.
Yeah, it's again what we saw in week 1. Really vanilla offense. I know people were not impressed with the first half, but I think you have to understand what Jeff Lebby and Brent Venables are trying to do. They understand that Wanye Morris is not there and that Antoine Harrison and some other guys are having to play positions that they're not normally used to playing. Additionally, one thing to note about offensive line play, and this is something that I talked to Caden Green about, who I got to sit down and watch the game with on Saturday, is sometimes as an offensive lineman, it's hard to play in a position that you're not used to playing all the time. It's easier to play on one side than it is the other. And if you can get an offensive line, that guy that can play on both sides of the ball, you got yourself a truly talented kid. And so I think a lot of what Jeff Lebby and Brent Venables are trying to do is they're trying to put pressure on this offensive line and to see where their breaking point is at. And additionally, we want to see what we can get out of this running back room, right? Eric Gray's production last year did not look great. We haven't seen a lot from Marcus Major. You got to think about it. Look at it as this. Eric Gray is really your returning running back. Everybody else, even with Marcus Major, consider them as brand new to the team because they put up little to almost no production. And so you really need to know what you're going to get out of those guys, and are they going to continue to be able to pound the ball even when the offensive line is not able to protect them. Another thing is we realized with the offensive line not being able to produce, we can't get a running game going. Additionally, Dylan Gabriel is having to scramble all over the field. So they know that the offensive line is the number one priority now in this offense going into conference play. Now, the second half was great. I mean, the fans showed up. The fans were loud. The student section stayed for a long time, which was incredible. And I think we have another night game against Kansas State.
Just got announced
here at the end of the month at 7. It's gonna be a true night game, 7 p.m. True night game. It should be getting dark around that time, so that one will be fun. The lights were great. That was a great addition to the experience there in Norman. I was impressed with Dylan Gabriel. We got to see a little bit more from him than what we'd previously gotten. Danny Stutzman continued to show us that he is going to be a dude. Reggie Grimes, I'm really impressed with him, continuing to get into the backfield, applying pressure to the quarterback. That one play where, we had Kent State on their 2 and he was running in the back of the end zone. That was an incredible play by the Kent State quarterback. But 2, one thing I noticed in that play was, and I know people were really frustrated with it because the Kent State quarterback got up the field and got some yardage. Mm-hmm. Look at how all of the defensive players were in the end zone chasing him down. Every single one of them. They were all chasing the quarterback. When was the last time you saw an OU defense do that? That was right. That opened my eyes. I think this team's going in the right direction. I think, especially next week, they're going to have to open up the playbook a lot more. We're going to see a lot more different schemes. You'll probably see some different blitz packages from Venables. And I don't think, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've seen hardly any, if any, yet.
Not really.
Yeah,
Not
so
really.
we're going to get – so, I mean, we're probably going to see less of this zone coverage, and we're going to probably see some more blitzing. I think OU fans need to calm down a little bit just because we're not putting up 60 points a game. Back in the day, and Brandon and Parker have talked about this, back in the day, a 33-3 win before 2017 or 18 would have been considered a really good win, right? But because offense has boosted everything so much lately, it's giving people unfair expectations.
Now, before I pass this to you, Jay, I am going to answer this comment here and we'll get back into it. But Bryce, here's where I disagree with you. Nobody on the panel has said that Texas is going to win the Big 12 or that Texas is going to the college football playoffs or that Texas is a national championship. We all commented on one game. So we're not overreacting to one game because we're talking about what was shown that game. None of us have made some conclusion as to how they'll look all season. So your point about Notre Dame is very valid. Very valid point. That's a very real point. But also, if we're just relegating it to one game and talking about what we saw there, we're not therefore extending it elsewhere, leveling expectations upon the Longhorns. That's my only pushback there, Bryce. But I completely agree with the second one. Brandon Hill says, just to let you know, me and my guy Corey have a podcast called The House Divided. Is our name on YouTube. That's awesome, Brandon. If you ever want to do some content with me, you just let me know. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm always down to talk college football. Jay, I apologize sending it to you.
No worries at all. And I'm gonna jump after this kind of, but my thoughts on the game. So like before the game started, I had kind of like five. I put a video out, 5 things on my channel that I think we should have looked out for. 4 of them was game based. The 5th one was mainly the recruits that were going to be there. But one of the things that I saw that came out of this was Dylan Gabriel was going to launch that thing to Marvin Mims. I knew that they were going to go deep as much as possible. They're going to take a lot of shots, and they were going to test it out. It feels like these 2 games were tests. They were testing a lot of stuff out. And kind of like Mark Jones is saying here with the O-line struggles. Yeah, the O-line struggled the last 3 years, and one of them won the Joe Moore Award. And so even with that, they're still trying to figure out how they want to do this with this up tempo offense, as well as the zone rushing that they're doing. The game started off slow, but it felt like they were just testing things. Now, not to defend Kent State or UTEP too much, but they're considered contenders in their conference. That says something. That means they've got some talent. Doesn't mean they always get it all together. Now, Ty hit me up and was like, come on, brother, don't talk about Kent State like that. And I get it. But at the same time, they've got talent in some places. And that Kent State offense was like number 4 or 5 in the country last year. They were just going, just like OU. And it felt like the OU defense was looking in the mirror and said, oh, we can shut this down. So they leaned heavy in on the defense. But the offense in that line without Wanye and just the movement, because I think Anton Harrison got moved to the right from the left, and they moved Tyler Guyton to the left. It's either vice versa, one of the two. But I know that the tackles got shifted, and you could kind of notice it. You could see that it didn't look as physical, something that you want out of an OU offensive line. But outside of that, Eric Gray kind of shut me up. He seems to be our top running back right now, the way he's doing things. I mean, Marcus Major has some big sparks, but Eric is kind of leading it. Shut me up. I didn't see him as a future back. I figured he was more of a change of pace guy. Nah, he's looking better. So, but in this game, sometimes you got to have some adversity. And Venable said this in the post game, conference, that this was the game where we had adversity and we were able to overcome it. You're going to have those. It's better when you go against a team that isn't super great and you go out there and you put the clamps on and hold a team to 3 points, something you haven't done since 2017. That was an FBS school. And I think the last one was Kansas in 2017. So being able to do that against a team that has an offense that was in the top 5 in the nation last year, that means that we're seeing the defense that Oklahoma fans have missed since the early 2000s. We're starting to get that back. Nebraska is a little terrifying to me in a way because players play very hard for interim coaches. They will run through walls for those guys for one game. This is their Super Bowl. This is their national championship this weekend in Lincoln. So I'm a little nervous about that. But as long as the playbook is opened, kind of like PG mentioned, they did not, you could tell it was all vanilla. And I had one commenter on my recap video say this. He's like, why would you try to beat a team with your entire playbook if you can beat them with the first page? I mean, you saw that. Why open more pages if you don't have to? And it made so much sense.
Completely agree. And I actually caught a little bit of heat in the playoffs. I said the same thing about Alabama beating Cincinnati. And everybody was like, oh, but see, Cincinnati, they played Alabama so close. And I sat there and I'm like, Cincinnati runs a 3-3-5 with an elite secondary. Why are you wanting us to test their secondary all game long and try and throw for 400 yards when we're just going to lull them to sleep with Brian Robinson and run right down their throats and they can't stop us? Why would we do anything else?
Exactly. Why change that up, especially when you've got a lot of pretty elite games coming up? Kansas State's looking really good. I said this, and I got a lot of flack for it. Kansas actually looks really good so far. Not great, but they look like they're going to give people problems. They'll probably still be in the bottom 3 of the conference, but they're going to give people problems. And then you've got to deal with Texas. Texas always plays Oklahoma hard, but you go down the list of all these games coming up. Iowa State beat Iowa finally, and they're not that great. I mean, neither are, but that's not the point. You've got to prepare for all of them. So why give them every bit of film today? Give them the most vanilla stuff. You can throw a couple chocolate chips in there, and that's fine. Mix it up.
Something
maybe
to chew on.
Some Oreos. So give them something to chew on to make them think you're getting something. And then pull out the rocky road and just be completely different when you play against them. You want to make sure that you're not giving up too much information. And to be honest, in those 2 games, it made sense not to give up too much. The offense is going to be able to put up 50 a game. I don't care what anybody says. They'll be able to at a certain point when they really open things up. But 33-3, I was happy. The first half, after they scored that touchdown on the 2-minute drill, and Venables mentioned this too. He's like, that was huge for him because you're going to have a lot of situations against really good teams where a 2-minute drill is going to happen. And the question is how effective are you in that drill? And they went out there and they cooked. And so Mims is going to get a whole bunch. He's going to have some more 100-yard games. I was a little disappointed there wasn't much Jalil Farouk. But I think that they're going to figure out a way to get him really involved in the more important games, less than really, the cupcakes that we played early. So I was happy, satisfied. It'll be okay. Relax, Sooner fans. Just calm down. The offensive line isn't got questions. The defense looks way better than we've seen since 2017. It'll be okay. Let the team grow. May only lose one game this year, at most 2. Hell, could go undefeated. We don't know. We'll see what it looks like later down the line.
Jalil Farouk actually was targeted several times in that game, and he dropped the ball. So
yeah, I know. I want more. Him and Braden Willis, that was my 300-yard game. The Braden Willis catch was a 300-yard game, but whatever.
Can we talk about how good Daniel Parker looked though? Because that was something I think that was a big question for a lot of people coming in. I know he only had 2 receptions, but my God, a 250-pound man was up there blocking like an offensive lineman. I mean, I am excited because with Braden Willis and Daniel Parker, you kind of have something that we kind of haven't had in a while where you can run a 2 tight end package.
Yeah, very true. Now, before we get out of here, Dominic, I would scroll up and get to it, but I remember your comment in my head. But Dominic Gomez in chat, longtime viewer, happy you're in here with us, Dominic. He asked, what is the best unit or the unit you're most impressed with thus far from Oklahoma? I'll start. I'm biased. I've worn my bias for this coach, for this side of the field, and particularly for this unit. And if you follow my recruiting content, you probably know where I'm going. Defensive line. If you got a defensive line that's humming, I'm instantly perked up watching your team, right? One of the big reasons I was excited for LSU this year, they've now sustained injuries on that defensive line. The Oklahoma defensive front with Todd Bates, with Miguel Chavez, and this Brent Venables defense, I think is playing as inspired football as you possibly could. That's going to be my answer. I don't know that that's necessarily the right answer, but that's the one that I'm going to go with because I like someone, I think it was Matt, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, I'm going to be so happy with myself if I get this right. Matt, I think, commented that Reggie Grimes has 4 sacks now. I mean, what are you going to do with that?
4.5.
What are you going to do with that?
Something we haven't had in a while. Something we miss.
Give him that half. Give him that half.
PG, what do you think? Most impressive unit thus far?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's the defensive line. But honestly, towards the end of the year, as this defense progresses, I think it could end up being the secondary at the end of the year. But I need to see more out of that secondary. And I think we've seen a lot of just how important Key Lawrence is to that secondary with him being out last game. Because they were still slinging the ball around and their receivers were still catching it. So I definitely think as the season goes along, as we still bit more from the secondary, I think it's going to switch from the defensive line to the secondary because we've seen the defensive line at Oklahoma over the past couple of years be competent. So yeah, I mean, that's just what I got on it.
See,
defensive
I
line,
think
but could be secondary.
I think there's competent, and then I think there's exciting. Right. And you're 100% right. And I know this is going to be, don't come at me, Oklahoma fans, for what I'm about to say. PG, you're smiling because you probably already have an inclination. The defensive front wasn't what they should have been under Alex Grinch, but you still had guys eating, right? It wasn't what it should have been. And I'm certainly not arguing that. My point is to PG's point, you still had a competent defensive front. This is different. This is different. This is exciting. This is inspired. This is different. But, I mean, people in the chat pointing out Billy Bowman, 100% correct. Y'all know how high I am on Billy Bowman. Y'all know how high I am. But Frightening is now saying the moment is here, and I think he's 100% right. Gentlemen, everybody in chat, PG, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Before I let PG plug up where all of his awesome content is, where you can find what he does, because he does it very well. Guys, up and comer on YouTube, you need to follow the PG show. I promise you that. There's a reason why I have him on here as much as I can. And we're linking up this week with Jay to talk more Oklahoma football. But be sure to follow Horns Down Podcast. Right now, Chris Griffin of the Horns Down Podcast is live with Nino over on their channel. Huge Texas fan. I love Nino's content. I can't say enough about Nino's Sports Corner, Fanatics Perspective, Texas Homer, the Lando Show. Those guys do a great job. So you know you're in for a treat with Chris. Y'all know what a fool Chris is. Y'all know how funny Chris is. That's going to be a great time over there. Be sure to go check that out. Also, be sure to check out Unfair Sports. Jay had to go. He does great content. He and I will be linking up again. PG, I'm going to pass it to you, and then we're going to get out of here.
Yeah. So you guys can find me on YouTube, The PG Show. You guys can find me on Twitter, The PG Show _. And then you guys can find me on any of the major podcast platforms. I always get that wrong. This Invisalign's killing me.
I know.
Google, Spotify, or Apple, just The PG Show as well. We got a lot of good content coming up and potentially trying to work out some Denton Geyer interviews. So we had one with Landon Sides. And
why don't you come see a game? I got an extra room.
I might just have to do that.
I got an extra room. We can go to the game on Friday. Saturday, we can watch all the college football content our hearts desire. That'd be a good time.
It can't be this week, but I might do it for the TCU weekend.
You let me know.
Let me know. So, but yeah, you guys stay tuned for that. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be exciting. We do have our first NIL deal with the podcast as well with an OU football player. It's going to be happening once a month. So be on the lookout for that one because that's really exciting. I did put that link to Chris's video in the chat, so you guys can hit that as well.
Did you? I don't see it anywhere.
It's on YouTube.
YouTube chat. Can you plug it in the chat right here real quick?
Yes, I can.
That way and then I'll let it go after this. That way that everybody here can hit that, go right over, let them know that we sent you, give them a Boomer Sooner and a horns up just to mess with everybody. You know what I mean? Just be well-rounded. Troll well. That's all I ask of all you fine people in the chat. Go troll well. But as always, thank y'all so much for being here. It means the world to us. We're coming again live on Friday for all of the action this weekend. Hope to see you then. And you already know we're going to have a ton of great content from here until then. Thank y'all so much for coming on. It means the world to us. And we'll see you next time. That's it. See you.